Hi, this is Mac of Mac's List. Find Your Dream Job is presented by Mac's List, an online community where you can find free resources for your job search, plus online courses and books that help you advance your career. My latest book is called Land Your Dream Job Anywhere. It's a reference guide for your career that covers all aspects of the job search, including expert advice in every chapter. You can get the first chapter for free by visiting maxlist.org/anywhere. This is Find Your Dream Job, the podcast that helps you get hired, have the career you want, and make a difference in life. I'm Mac Pritchard, your host and publisher of Mac's List. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Becky Thomas and Ben Forstag. Ben is back filling in for Jessica Black, who is on vacation. This week, we're talking about how to tell your story on LinkedIn. You probably know that you shouldn't treat your LinkedIn profile as an online resume. Instead, says this week's guest expert, Shelly Elslinger, use LinkedIn to tell your professional story. And she says if you do it right, you can establish yourself as a leader in your industry. Shelly and I talk more about LinkedIn's storytelling powers later in the show. Here's a warning humanities majors often get in college. Expect to earn less than your peers after you graduate and eventually throughout your career. Becky has good news for liberal arts students everywhere. A new study says that doesn't mean you will end up as a starving artist. She tells us more in a moment. You're a single parent, school lets out at 3, but your workday doesn't end until 5. How do you find an employer who will give you the flexible hours you need to take care of your family? That's our question of the week. It comes from Cheryl Jacoby in Vancouver, Washington. Ben shares his advice shortly. First, as always, let's check in with the Mac's List team. And Becky, you're out there every week, poking around the nooks and crannies of the internet, looking for tools, books, and websites our listeners can use in a job search or their careers. So what have you uncovered for our listeners this week, Becky?
I have a study that came out this just recently that sort of addresses a big question that we all have in our professional lives and sort of our lives in general. And the question is, should you choose a field of study based on the strength of the job market, or should you follow your dreams? There's been a lot of shifting in the discourse about how people should make education decisions. My generation, cursed millennials, was told we could do anything we wanted, follow our dreams, and then the Great Recession happened as we entered the workforce. And a lot of my contemporaries struggled to build careers out of college with their history and their literature degrees and their sort of like quote-unquote useless degrees. And as technology has advanced exponentially in the last couple of decades, the common wisdom has really been to go study something in STEM, that's science, technology, engineering, and math, learn a tangible technical skill, or you'll be ill-equipped to enter the workforce. So we've really made a big shift in the dialogue that's happening. But as a student, if you're sort of trying to figure out what you want to do with your life, what if your passion lies in the humanities? Do you have to sort of decide whether to be a starving artist or to, do something that you might not enjoy, find a secure career that might make you miserable in the end? We know from professionals out in the world that if you're unhappy in your job, other things are going to fall apart. So how do we sort of decide those things? So today's resource really gives hope to those maybe more sort of liberal arts-minded folks, whether you're a student or a degree holder in the humanities. It's a new study from the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and it's called The State of the Humanities 2018, Graduates in the Workforce and Beyond. So it compares humanities graduates' job status, earnings, job satisfaction against those of graduates from engineering, business, and the sciences, and this includes health professions. So overall, things are looking good for humanities graduates. A few key findings from the study that I wanted to highlight. Bachelor's degree graduates in engineering and the sciences earn roughly $10,000 to $30,000 more after graduation. So that's a big difference. But humanities majors actually catch up over time. So this common wisdom that like if you get your humanities degree, you're never going to make as much as a science or technology person isn't actually true. In the current workforce, humanities majors are eventually making more. So you might make less in the beginning, but you will eventually, make a living wage. The other point in the study, humanities grads track closely to other fields in terms of job security, job location, and opportunities for advancement. And I think this last one is really key, especially for a job seeker, somebody who maybe has a humanities degree that they're like, I don't know if I can really use this. The study was talking a lot about another strength of humanities majors, which is they don't necessarily see their education tied to a specific field. So it might be unsettling at the beginning to not have a really clear career path, but it means that these humanities majors are often more agile. They're more able to pursue a variety of jobs in a lifetime, and we all know that people are changing jobs. So this might actually prepare you better for that sort of shift and sort of the roller coaster of a career that can happen. And so I think that overall, this study is really sort of interesting to look at in terms of what kind of field of study you want to pursue, or sort of looking at the degree that you've got. And the fact that humanities and sort of the knowledge of culture and the knowledge of society and art and all of these important things actually do still have a place in our society. There was also another article that sort of talked about the study in the Seattle Times, and I can link to it in the show notes as well. But it noted a recent report from Microsoft about the future of artificial intelligence. And this report called out how important the role of social sciences and humanities will have in the development and management of AI technology. So I think that as we're developing all these technologies, we also have to remember we're all humans, and the fact that we have to continue studying these things is really cool to me. So the bottom line, I think, for this is that a humanities degree doesn't place you in that starving artist category for life. While pay does start out lower, compensation does grow over time, and I think ambitious professionals can really use this broad foundation of liberal arts, communication skills, and other soft skills that are actually still really important in today's workforce. So, yeah.
So I actually got into an argument with a friend about this exact article when it came out.
You
cool.
did?
Yeah, it was all of us humanities students trying to figure out what's going on.
Shall we go around the table and quickly identify our undergraduate majors?
Political science.
Political science.
English and journalism.
Latin American studies minor over here.
Okay, nice.
So, I think this totally makes sense to me, especially when you talk about the long-term income equality, because again, we know people switch careers. You might switch 3 or 4 times over the course of your life. And if you get very specialized training in one thing, it makes it much harder to pivot out of that and do something different. It might require retraining. And it's true that someone who's got a humanities background can't jump right into a career in coding, for example.
Right.
But I think it places them in a situation where it's much easier to pivot over the course of their career, especially if their formal education was not tied to a specific career path.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what position were you arguing with your friend?
Yeah.
So my friend, for all cards on the table, she works at a higher education institution. And for them, like, one of their key metrics is, can we get our students jobs? And her take was like, no, students need to specialize because, that's how they get a job right out of college. And that might be true. It might be much easier to get a job right out of college with coding. And my take, and this is kind of a classic liberal arts take, is like, yeah, but there's value outside of education. The value of education is more than just job training. Like, it teaches you how to learn and how to think and how to socialize and all these other things. And I think over the course of a career, like, you're going to be in a much better position having a general degree.
Yeah. This study certainly rang true for me, Becky, when I look at peers and people I knew both as an undergraduate and later in my career. I find that the liberal arts education has helped people be more nimble and make those pivots as things have changed. So, yeah. Well, it's a great resource. Thanks for sharing it, Becky.
Yeah,
and
thanks.
If you got a suggestion for Becky, please write her. We'd love to share your idea on the show. Her address is becky@maxlist.org. Now let's turn to you, our listeners, and Jessica Black remains on vacation. Good for her. And Ben is back for a second week in a row, filling in for Jessica. What's in the mailbag this week?
So this is a really good question. I like this one. This one comes from Cheryl Jacoby of Vancouver, Washington. And Cheryl asks, I'm a single mom. Regular work hours are 9 to 5, but regular school hours are 8 to 3. How can I find employers who will provide the flexibility I need to take care of my family? This is a question that a lot of people have, and you don't need to be a single mother to empathize. My wife and I, we've got 2 little ones, and the greatest question we ask each other every week is like, who decided that preschool starts at 9 o'clock and ends at 2:30, right? It doesn't jive with either of our jobs, and so it's a struggle. But, I think, Cheryl, I'm going to suggest 2 different but kind of mutually supportive approaches to think through this. The first one is target family-friendly employers. So in other words, companies that are most likely to provide flexibility for working parents like yourself. Some companies are really open about this. They'll say right in their job description that they're family-friendly. And I think this is a trend you see more and more employers do that, especially as the labor markets get tighter. But even if the companies don't explicitly make this claim, you can sometimes read between the lines. So certain code words like work-life balance or flexibility can indicate an employer can accommodate your family needs. Also, take a look at the benefits the company offers if you can find that information. An employer that provides parental leave or paid childcare is probably going to provide support to working parents in other areas of your life, including time and flexibility. I've even heard of some firms that offer things like financial assistance for in vitro fertilization or adoption services. And, if they're trying to get you pregnant, they're going to be flexible about your work once you have a kid. So that's kind of targeting specific types of employers that can help you. The second approach involves being proactive and creative about how you can mold your work-life balance around your parenting schedule. So look, in most organizations, the bottom line is that the work gets done on schedule, and how it gets done or when that happens is often up to your discretion, and that's more and more true the farther you get in your career generally. If you can't work within that normal 9 to 5 time frame, it really behooves you to explain to the hiring manager exactly when and how you can make up the time and get the work that needs to be done. So, don't leave it up to the hiring manager to figure this out. Be proactive about it. So maybe you propose that, you're going to work from home for a couple hours before and after your kids go to school, just so you can be there to help them with that transition. Or that you're going to, find some other solution around that 9 to 5 schedule. If you do this well, a lot of employers will be willing to meet you in the middle there and find a way to make it work. I'd add that the best time to do this kind of negotiation around flexibility is probably closer to the end of the hiring process than at the beginning. And, we always have the most leverage and the most bargaining power when an offer is on the table. Of course, waiting that long in the hiring process can really be stressful if family flexibility is like a must-have. And it sounds like Cheryl, like if she's the one parent at home, she must be there when her kids go to school and get picked up. And so it can be angsty to wait until a job is literally on the table before you have that discussion. So be strategic about it. But again, waiting is probably going to get you the best results. Mac, Becky, any additional thoughts here? The two non-parents in the room?
Yeah, I mean, as a non-parent, I think that you probably have better advice than I do, but that does make sense to me. I wonder if it sounds like Cheryl might currently have a job. So I think some of that advice about just like coming up with a plan and bringing it to whether it's your hiring manager or your like current employer and be like, here's how I can make this work. Here's like how I'm planning to get this work done outside of normal hours. Let's give it a try, do like a trial period, something like that. But yeah, I mean, that seems very reasonable. So hopefully it works out.
And I think that idea of you being proactive with the solution is like the answer for just about any barrier to any job problem you have. Instead of presenting it to the employer as a problem and say like, you guys figure it out. Yeah. It's like, here's the problem. Here's what I propose we do. And if it's an equitable fix, the employer, and they really want you, they're probably going to say, yes, that's fine.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's right. And I also think when you present that plan, if you've been doing good work, the employer won't want to lose you. They value what you're accomplishing. And candidly, it's expensive to replace people and disruptive too. So if you present a plan that allows you to continue to do good work and be productive, I think you'll find most employers will be very open to that conversation.
Thanks, guys, and thank you, Cheryl.
All right. Well, thank you, Cheryl, and thank you, Ben, for filling in for Jessica these last 2 weeks. If you've got a question you'd like us to feature on the show, please send Jessica an email. Her address is jessica@maxlist.org, and she will be back here in the studio next Wednesday. And you can also call her listener line. That number is area code 716-JOB-TALK. Or post your question on Facebook. We love getting messages on our Facebook page. And I believe, Becky, didn't we break the 6,000 barrier on Facebook this week?
Yeah, 6,000 folks like our page on Facebook. So go check out Max List on Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Terrific.
You could be number 6,001.
Yeah.
Ooh.
All right. And if we use your question on the show, we'll send you a copy of Land Your Dream Job Anywhere. We'll be back in just a moment. And when we return, I'll talk with this week's guest expert, Shelly Elslinger, about how to tell your story on LinkedIn. We all know that first impressions matter. And the very first thing a hiring manager sees is your cover letter. That letter gives you a make or break opportunity to wow an employer. Yet too many job seekers squander this chance. They send a cover letter with typos, a sloppy format, and cut and paste text. And avoiding those rookie mistakes isn't enough. You also have to tell a compelling story. Sounds complicated, doesn't it? In fact, if you follow a few simple rules, you can write a cover letter that gets you an interview. I've created a guide that shows you how to do this. It's called Simple Rules for a Winning Cover Letter. Inside, I explain the ideal content, structure, and style that appeal to hiring managers, and you get examples and templates to write your own winning cover letters. Get Simple Rules for a Winning Cover Letter today. Go to maxlist.org/cover letter. Start transforming your cover letter today. Again, that's maxlist.org/cover letter. Now back to the show. Now let's turn to this week's guest expert, Shelly Elslinger. Shelly Elslinger is a globally recognized LinkedIn trainer, and she's the president of Linked Express. Shelly brings a unique breadth of knowledge, as well as fun and passion, to all of her workshops and speaking engagements. Her signature workshop, Linked Up, Rise and Lead On line, has helped countless professionals maximize both personal and professional brands and social media influence. Shelly joins us today from Toronto in Ontario, Canada. Shelly, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Mac.
Well, I'm excited to have you on the show because I know you're often called the LinkedIn Wonder Woman. You know all there is to know about LinkedIn. And when we were talking before the show, you really stressed that the importance of telling stories on LinkedIn. So that's our topic today.
Yes, stories on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Now, tell us, Shelly, why is that so important? Why do people? Because as you know, people often think of LinkedIn as a kind of an online resume. Why should people think about telling their stories on LinkedIn?
So LinkedIn was never really meant to be a job search site or an online resume. I think it just developed into that realm just because it is an awesome networking site. And I think people just associate it with getting a job and finding the right people and finding the human resource managers that they need to reach out to. And I think it just became that way over the years. But in reality, LinkedIn has always been about really having a brand online, being approachable, and having a career story. And if you actually look at LinkedIn from the background photo to the actual story, which I call the summary, down through into the recommendations and the skills section, you can easily see where everything combines and works together as a story, from the cover page to the title to the content to the stuff that backs the story up, and to the testimonials that people have and give when they enjoy the story.
Well, I want to dig into the elements of the story, and you've outlined them for us. Before we do that, Shelly, tell us about the benefits of using LinkedIn as a storytelling platform. How is this going to help both job seekers and people who are managing their careers?
So the most important thing for people to remember is that relationship building comes first. And we don't normally build relationships through something that's rehearsed or something that's cookie cutter. We tend to really build relationships through getting to know people. And so if we just put a copy and paste of our online resume on our LinkedIn profiles and think that that's good enough, then we're not really thinking about relationship building. We're not actually thinking about what's in it for them. Because if we think about what's in it for them, then we understand that they have to connect with us. And the only way they can connect with us online is if they understand what we're about, who we are, what our value is, what we like, what makes us up, what our backgrounds are, what stimulates us, what we enjoy. And that's what really puts somebody in touch with somebody else. And I know for myself, how I have become the LinkedIn Wonder Woman is because I allowed myself to be vulnerable and authentic, and allowed myself to be me. And in that way, brought on a lot of relationships that way because people could see who I was about.
I love your point about the connection that results from storytelling, Shelly, because when we tell stories or we listen to them, there's an emotional connection that results, isn't there?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think typically people think about telling a story to try to inspire or move someone to action, but in this case, we're talking about using stories to help in our careers. And I'm reminded of somebody I know who's an expert on storytelling, and he was talking about the power of stories. And he said, well, nobody ever marched on Washington because of good data. You've got to have stories that engage us. And I think that's true in our careers as well.
Exactly.
Well, let's dig into this. Now, how do you see the people you work with use storytelling effectively? You mentioned the elements of a LinkedIn profile, and what are some ideas you can share with our listeners, Shelly, about how people can apply this storytelling approach to their LinkedIn page?
So I think there are 3 things that you can take a look at. Number 1, your story that you write, the content that you give, and how you write it. Because if we take a look at, for example, the tagline and the branding statement, instead of using a title, we can actually use those 120 characters to actually speak about what our worth is, what we do, what solutions we can solve. And we can also indicate our level of confidence the way that we write our tagline, because it's actually, I compare it to the title of our story. So when we have a strong title, that motivates more people to want to read more. So I think that that's really important, what we put in the tagline and also what we put in the content. There are 2,000 characters available in the content. And I think the most important thing is we start off with a hook, which is the first 2 sentences, because that follows our profile everywhere. And that shouldn't just be about content that is the average content. This is something that should hook you, should stand out, something that people will resonate and want to read more. So, and then to continue on with your story. So I think what we say and how we say it is definitely important. Then the other thing about telling our story online is it's the words that we use. So a lot of people use filler words. I know that in 2018 so far, the biggest filler word starts with a P, and we all know it really well, and it's called passionate. So if we can stop using so many filler words and start using words that matter and resonate with people, then and also words that are searchable. I think that we'll be able to connect more with people because our stories will be more pertinent and will matter more and won't be as fluffy, but more meaningful.
So, Shelly, let's pause there for a moment. Tell me, how can people identify those filler words? Because I can imagine a listener thinking, "Well, I am passionate, and I want to share that."
So, I mean, if people love to use the word passionate or the word motivated or the word specialized, these are all considered filler words by LinkedIn. You can use them. I just think people overdo it, and we have to watch that. With too many fluff words, our stories become less meaningful. So I think the most important thing is when we're writing our story to think of words that can impact readers more so than fluff words, which can actually bring the meaning in our stories. It can lessen the meaning of our stories. So I think that looking at words that actually create impact is one thing. The other thing that people can do is, if you have an expertise at something, find out the words that resonate with those expertise and fill in some of those words, because that allows you to show you know what you're talking about. So then there's some thought leadership associated with that. The third thing is how you write. So often when it's a resume, if people cut and paste the resume, they just cut and paste, and normally it's point form or it's long paragraph form. And it doesn't allow people to digest the information well or get a sense of your character or your personality. When we write in small paragraphs and we make sure that we're speaking to the audience or the viewers that we want to attract, we can pretend that we're in an actual networking session and think about what we would say if we were talking to somebody offline, face to face.
So write the way you talk.
Write the way you talk, yeah, yes.
Always excellent. Always great advice for any kind of writing assignment, isn't it? Okay, well, you mentioned thought leadership a moment ago. How can people both tell their story and at the same time show leadership in their industry on LinkedIn?
So this was the other thing I was going to mention earlier, is that we often think about our profiles as the thing that's the most important on LinkedIn. And I would say there's actually 3 parts of LinkedIn that actually work together to make a LinkedIn experience. And that would be the profile or the story. The other thing would be how we actually control our positioning on LinkedIn. And what I mean by that is how we promote our visibility on LinkedIn. So how we extend our reach on LinkedIn and our visibility. And the third thing would be how we create a consistent brand. And that's not only about what we market, but how we're consistent on LinkedIn. So those are the 3 things that I think everybody has to kind of take a look at, because one thing doesn't work together. If we build our story and just leave it there and expect people to come, they're not going to come. So I think that we have to get into a habit of making sure that we're visible on LinkedIn, whether that's using our knowledge and our expertise to create information on our news feed or create publications through Pulse, or to find people that are somewhat connected to our industry and start relating with them, either actually commenting on posts, sharing their posts, liking. I mean, there are so many ways that you can actually be more visible on LinkedIn, and those are just a few of them.
Yeah, so not only share your story, but publish content that's helpful to others, then engage with people on LinkedIn. Those are 3 great strategies. What about listening? How important is that in both being successful on LinkedIn, but also in helping to share our stories on the platform?
So listening, and active listening, I call it, is important both on and offline. And I think the most important reason being online is that, and it requires, I think, even more like a even a higher level of listening skills. And that would be because instead of jumping and assuming and going out there with expectations, we have to realize what our target audience really wants and give what they want. So the LinkedIn experience is really not about always focusing on our needs and wants. Really good networkers understand the needs and wants of others. And the only way that you can really find out that information is by truly listening. And that means, what are people writing on LinkedIn? What are they asking on LinkedIn? What are some of the solutions that they're looking for, or their problems that they're looking to solve? And see if you can solve it. Or if not solve it, maybe you can help in some way.
How much time do you typically find that people need to spend on LinkedIn during a typical week, Shelly, to make a difference?
Okay, so if according to LinkedIn and the 546 million users that are on LinkedIn, the average person only spends about 17 minutes a month. But those are not the people that actually are living the LinkedIn experience and actually enjoying and getting the most out of LinkedIn that they can. You can technically do LinkedIn in about 15 minutes a day, but because I think it's the consistency that matters. And once you have your profile built, you know exactly what you want to do or what you haven't done already and what you need to do tomorrow. There becomes a routine. So I tend to spend about 30 minutes on LinkedIn a day. I mean, I go back on there just to see what my connections and my network is up to. But I spend 30 minutes a day providing things and providing support and providing help to my network. So every day I wake up, it's my morning time with my coffee, and I decide, how can I help somebody in my network today? Or maybe even multiple people. And that'll either be because I think that somebody's presented with a problem, or I think I can provide a solution, or I can see that somebody has written something and I just want to support them, because I know that what goes around comes around. And I know that at the end of the day, when I wake up with that kind of spirit and that kind of desire, it's going to come back to me in some way, and usually much more than I've ever expected.
Well, terrific advice. Well, Shelly, tell us what's next for you.
Well, my signature workshop is Rise Up and Lead Online. That's for everybody. But my signature workshop is LinkedIn in High Heels, my other signature workshop. And that's really devoted to women leaders, women executives. These women can go into a online networking event and have a presence, have a voice, but then they get online and it's a completely different world. And there's nothing more exciting than me to work with women and aspiring leaders who aim to go far in business, and to just see them rise their level of expertise on online, and their voices online, and their visibility.
Well, that's exciting work. I know people can learn more about you and your workshops by visiting your website, which is linkedexpress.ca. That's CA for Canada. And they can also find you on LinkedIn as well. And we'll include links to both sites in the show notes. Shelly, thanks for being on the program today.
Thanks for having me, Mac.
You're welcome. Take care. We're back in the Max List studio with Becky and Ben. What are some of your thoughts about my conversation with Shelly?
I really like the storytelling focus. I think it's just so key to sort of like elevating your LinkedIn profile to something super rudimentary to something that's actually compelling. So I liked sort of all of it, but I guess I would say the point she was making about sort of really paying attention to like the headline and the summary and making sure you're telling sort of a consistent story but also really hooking your audience. So like thinking about what is going to sort of stop your audience in their tracks and what types of things you want to be known for, I think is really important.
Ben, what are your thoughts?
I liked her emphasis on using it on a day-to-day regular basis. And like that's really where you're going to extract the most value from LinkedIn. So you might remember like back at the turn of the century, there was this product called a Ron Popeil rotisserie oven. It was advertised on TV all the time. I'm getting to my point, Becky. Don't look at me like that.
Sure?
I'm getting a quizzical look on Becky's face.
So the motto was set it and forget it, right? You could just turn it on and walk away, and 10 hours later, you had a cooked ham. LinkedIn is not set it and forget it, right? And so I think a lot of people spend so much time focusing on their profile. Like if they can just get their profile perfect and then they can walk away and like the hordes will come to them. And I think that's generally not how it works. And
that's the dream for some people, that a recruiter will call and all their problems will be solved.
And you really have to supplement that profile with like regular participation on the platform. Like she said, posting articles or commenting on other people's articles. And I think this really kind of speaks to this divide that we talk about a lot in job searching, where it's like talking about what you can do versus showing what you can do. And your profile is all about talking about what you can do, which is nice. But when you start having conversations with people on the platform or sharing resources or commenting on having astute comments on what the things they're posting, that's really you showing what you can do. And I think that's really where you're going to get the greatest value from LinkedIn.
Yeah, I agree. I meet so many job seekers who say, if I could only get in front of the hiring manager and tell my story, it would make all the difference. And in fact, you can, which was the main point I heard Shelly make, which is LinkedIn does offer you an opportunity to share your story. You need to do it thoughtfully and do the kind of writing that you mentioned, Becky, and pay attention to the headline and the summary. But to your point, Ben, it's you also have to pay attention to engagement and networking and community.
Might I share a personal story here?
Please do.
So right now we are hiring someone at Max List, and we just closed taking applications.
But you guys closed today?
I think we close actually today or tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And one thing I've noticed is I notice when candidates who have applied for the job also start looking at my profile on LinkedIn and start commenting on things that I posted or liking things that I posted. And, this isn't to say like that person's going to get the job or necessarily get the interview, but it gets their name on my radar, right? And it's just a one of these things of like, oh yeah, I know that person. That person has been active on all these other platforms. I'm going to give them a more of a look than I might give an anonymous candidate. So this argument about if only I could get in front of the hiring manager, like you totally can, and it totally does get noticed. And I'm sure Becky's had a similar experience.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, even if they're not doing much, like you get an engagement that gives you a reason to click on their profile and take a look. I mean, it's subtle and it's maybe like small actions, but it makes a big difference in the grand scheme of your career and sort of how people see you.
And when so much of it is just being top of mind.
Yeah.
And just having that name recognition.
Totally.
I mean, that little extra edge helps.
And I'm guessing for how many applications, we probably had several dozen, and how many people took the time to visit your profiles, the two of you? I'm guessing just a handful.
Yeah, just a handful, maybe like 15%. I don't know, like a third. At the most.
5 or 6 maybe.
Yeah.
And you probably as a result, you took an extra look at their page and maybe even Googled them. But the point here is everybody's got that opportunity to do that. And what I'm hearing you say is just a fraction took advantage of that chance. Yeah. Well, terrific. Well, thank you both. And thank you, Shelly, for joining us this week. And you, our listeners, for downloading today's episode of Find Your Dream Job. We want to make sure that you make the most of your job applications when you hit that send button. And one way to do that is to write the perfect cover letter. So get our simple rules for a winning cover letter today. Go to maxlist.org/cover letter. Again, that's maxlist.org/cover letter. And join us next Wednesday when our special guest will be Marie Zemanoff. She'll debunk common myths about applicant tracking systems. Until next time, thanks for letting us help you find your dream job.